Minho, overwhelmed by anger and curiosity, grabs Ji-hyun in Yik-young's body and accuses her of trying to manipulate him by making him think she knows him. While there's some truth to his perception, he's missing the point that she's a complete stranger. In-jung and Kang arrive, sensing the tension, and Minho holds onto Ji-hyun's arm until In-jung steps in, making her presence known. Ji-hyun apologizes and walks away, realizing she should heed the scheduler's advice and be more cautious about acting too much like Ji-hyun around her friends, and I use the term loosely, considering some are more like backstabbing ex-friends. At dinner, Kang informs Minho that he won't be working on the Haemido project anymore and tries to hand over his sketches. Minho refuses to accept this decision, insisting he's the only one who can do it. As much as I want Kang to distance himself from the whole manipulative scheme, Kang takes Ji-hyun downstairs and lectures her on customer service, making it clear that Minho is his friend's fiancé. Ji-hyun can't help but pout, feeling jealous of the kindness Kang shows Minho, especially considering how harsh he's been toward her. Oh, sweet, naive Ji-hyun. In-jung, curious about how Minho handled the land deal, asks him to drive her home pretending to be sick. Minho is irritated by her boldness, both in asking for a ride and for calling him Papa in public, but she reassures him that they're in the clear. He tells her about the plan to declare Ji-hyun mentally incompetent, urging her to be patient as it will take time for Ji-hyun's father to accept the decision. In-jung, frustrated by the ongoing secrecy and their hidden relationship, complains that the wedding was supposed to be the end of their 2 years of sneaking around. Minho reassures In-jung with smooth lines, telling her that location doesn't matter if they're comfortable with each other and that they're going to be together for the rest of their lives. These lines, though, come off as hollow and insincere. In-jung, though reassured, is hurt when Minho unknowingly turns away as she tries to hold his hand. Despite her being a cheater, there's a hint of sympathy for her, as she's deep in lies due to her love for him, only to be met with emotional distance. As Ji-hyun rides the bus home, she deletes all the pictures of her and Minho from her camera. But when she reaches the photos of her girlfriends, she can't bring herself to erase them. She cries, asking In-jung when they stop being friends, feeling heartbroken. Then, realizing something, she calls the scheduler, asking if the phone can be used to talk to the living as well. The scheduler, exasperated, points out how she's only just now figured it out. Ji-hyun calls the people on her list while heading home, but is spotted by the landlady, leading her to flee to avoid another confrontation. As Ji-hyun goes to sleep, her soul exits her body, and Yik-young wakes up to the landlady knocking on her door for rent. The landlady mentions seeing Yik-young outside and recalls her being there the day before, making Yik-young start to suspect something strange is happening. She looks at her reflection, bewildered by the situation. Ji-hyun, feeling nervous, quickly presses her panic button to call the scheduler for help. However, she receives a video message from him instead, where he humorously tells her this is not an emergency situation, wagging his finger at her. Yik-young grows suspicious, but doesn't press the issue, and Ji-hyun breathes a sigh of relief. The next day, Ji-hyun cheerfully enters work and asks Kang to sign her time in her notebook to calculate her freelance pay. He agrees with a smile, and she thanks him in an exaggerated way, calling him Sisa Jangnims, a playful version of boss. He asks her to stop calling him that, but she jokingly suggests calling him Han Kang or just Kang, even drawing comparisons to American names like Jenny and John. Kang looks unimpressed, but Ji-hyun sheepishly pulls back, realizing the awkwardness of calling him that in Yik-young's body. Despite the awkwardness, Kang can't help but smile as she walks away. Ji-hyun's words about wanting to become a mother like her linger in Mom's mind. So she heads to the hospital with a thermos of ox bone soup, something she doesn't usually eat because it's Ji-hyun and Dad's favorite. Meanwhile, Manager Oh's wife arrives at the restaurant with a pot of the same soup for the staff. Ji-hyun devours her portion, savoring every drop, and when Kang sees her enjoying it so much, he offers up his rice so she can have more. It's such a sweet, small gesture from Kang, and it also beautifully ties Ji-hyun to her mother through the soup. Outside, a little kid breaks a glass and cries, so Ji-hyun steps in to clean up and cheer him up with a magic trick, making him smile. Kang watches, clearly moved, and the moment triggers a memory of high school when he joined the magic club and Ji-hyun showed him the same trick repeatedly. As he watches her smile, he starts seeing Ji-hyun and Yik-young. Later, Kang sits with manager Oh, pointing out the many similarities between Ji-hyun and Yi-kyung, their eating habits, nervous tics, word choices, and now the magic trick. He notes, "and by feelings too," implying that while she feels like Ji-hyun, his feelings for both are starting to blur. Ji-hyun embarks on her first mission to collect tears and visits an old high school friend at a gallery. She introduces herself as Ji-hyun's friend and requests to film a video message to help Ji-hyun connect with her friends and encourage her to wake up. The friend agrees to share a tear-jerking story, but no tears are shed. Instead, she bluntly comments that Ji-hyun isn't dead and brings up the subject of her engagement. Ji-hyun leaves, realizing that this task is going to be more challenging than she expected. It's puzzling why she starts with distant friends rather than COO, one of her closest friends. Even if she doesn't believe Kang would cry for her, why not start with someone she's closer to? Kang visits Ji-hyun in the hospital, bringing her favorite roses and covering her exposed toes with a smile. He wonders aloud why he keeps seeing her, even though she's here. He calls himself crazy, trying to convince himself of it. Ji-hyun heads to Seowoo's bakery, realizing that gathering tears from her close friends is tricky since they already know her as Kang's employee, making it harder to be seen as Ji-hyun's friend. She tries to ask Seowoo about a friend, but her eager questioning inadvertently scares her off, leading Seowoo to misinterpret her intentions. Ji-hyun buys some pastries and heads back to work. On her way back, she spots Kang, but he ignores her. Driving past, Ji-hyun runs to catch up, asking why he didn't stop, but Kang brushes her off, pretending not to have seen her. Ji-hyun comes downstairs with his favorite pastry for him, but he reacts with an outburst, clearly trying to suppress his feelings. He yells at her to leave and stop bothering him, which almost brings her to tears. If only he'd follow his own advice and figure out why he's acting so hot and cold. Meanwhile, In-jung, feeling ignored by Min-ho, invites Seowoo to dinner. They head to Kang's, where they briefly cross paths with Ji-hyun. Manager Oh sends Ji-hyun home, noticing she doesn't look well. In-jung then asks another waitress if Wi-kyung is a good worker, since she seems to get special treatment. The waitress explains that it's because the boss likes her. She comes and goes as she pleases. Ji-hyun returns home, tired, and calls the scheduler to repay the 49 he lent out her earlier, surprised that she's paying him back so soon. He's busy with a songwriting session, but tells her to come to him since she's the one who owes him. She reminds him that she won't be able to access the money once she leaves Yi-kyung's body, but the scheduler introduces a new rule. If it's meant for him, she'll be able to touch it. She jokes about whether that means she can touch Ji-hyun too. She meets him at a club where he's performing his song Scarecrow. Ji-hyun listens and claps, which the scheduler appreciates. She then plays around with the piano and mentions that being a singer was once her dream. This makes the scheduler laugh, but she teases him by singing a line from his song, which surprises him. She shares that her dad didn't let her pursue singing, as he wanted her to focus on getting married instead. Clearly, that didn't go as planned. She shares with him that she made her first attempt at gathering tears today, but felt utterly pathetic. He reassures her, saying it's to be expected for someone in her position, and reminds her that humans are complicated. He adds, "But you're better off than a scheduler because you have the hope of coming back to life." Curious, she asks how he became a scheduler. He reveals he volunteered. When she asks why, he answers, "I don't know what it is, but I think I died with something truly important left to do. That's why I volunteered. If I finish my 5-year term without incident, I can do that thing. That's the reason why I live as a scheduler." She asks what that thing is, and he responds, "If I can, you." Why would I be a scheduler? Realizing it was a silly question, she adds that he's got it pretty tough for someone so young. Yi-kyung doesn't make it to work that night due to food poisoning from something Ji-hyun ate. The doctor, Kyung-bin, comes by and asks about her, but the boss informs him she didn't show up. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun waits outside, wondering why Yi-kyung hasn't returned, and calls the scheduler, saying it's an emergency. They find Yi-kyung in pain, and the scheduler tells Ji-hyun to take her to the hospital. At the hospital, Ji-hyun tells the doctor what she ate, but he's shocked she didn't throw up. Meanwhile, Kang is at work, reflecting on whether he was too harsh on Ji-hyun the day before. Min-ho presents a land deal to his dad with a financial backup plan in place for a potential hostile takeover. At the same time, dad begins throwing up as well. Ji-hyun realizes she's late for work, heads to the drugstore for medicine and rushes to the bus stop. Minho, leaving the hospital, spots her as she trips while crossing the street. He instinctively goes to help her but stops himself. Minho watches as Ji-hyun limps to the bus stop, taking her medication before deciding to offer her a ride. She sneers and refuses, but he tells her he's headed to Kang's place anyway and asks why she won't accept. Ji-hyun bluntly replies, "Because I don't like you." When he presses her, asking why, she shrugs and says there's no reason, she just dislikes him. She adds that he probably needs a reason for everything, like or dislike, to understand it. Minho doesn't let it go, though, and for some reason drags her into his car. In the car, Ji-hyun spots a picture of him, well, herself. She comments without thinking she looks stupid, then quickly corrects herself, saying she looks trusting and gullible instead. Kang waits outside, clearly frustrated when he sees Ji-hyun getting out of Minho's car. The jealousy brewing between the two is palpable. Once Minho comes downstairs to his office, Kang confronts him, demanding to know why Ji-hyun was in his car. He asks where they met, why Minho gave her a ride, and if he's given up on Ji-hyun already. Minho counters by questioning why they're discussing Ji-hyun when it's really about Kang's feelings for Ji-hyun. Both deny having feelings for the other, shouting that they have no interest in Ji-hyun, but the back and forth just continues with neither one admitting their true feelings. It's a classic case of denial, with both trying to act uninterested while clearly being caught up in the confusion and tension. Minho leaves and Kang calls Ji-hyun or Ji-hyun in her body down to fire her for the last time. He explains that Minho is his friend's fiancé and that he has a responsibility to protect her. Ji-hyun starts to realize that he's doing all of this for her, though she's still missing the fact that he's also acting out of jealousy, refusing to admit it. Kang hands her an envelope of money, but she refuses to take it. With tears in her eyes, she thanks him, acknowledging the care he's shown to his friend's friend. She tells him she'll consider it hers, and with a quiet farewell to the staff, she walks out. Outside, Minho overhears that Ji-hyun has been fired and waits for her to come out. He asks what she plans to do next, and then offers her a job as his housekeeper. While frustrating because she's leaving Kang's to work for him, it makes sense why Ji-hyun accepts the offer to spy on his secret life. She asks about the pay, and once she hears the terms, takes the job. Ji-hyun agrees to work as Minho's housekeeper, seeing it as a chance to gather information about his shady dealings and her father's company at risk. Minho is surprised by how easily she accepts, expecting some resistance since it's the only way he's been able to engage with Ji-hyun. He gives her his address, and she agrees to meet him the next morning. As Minho drives off, he vows to see how long Ji-hyun will continue to glare at him. Ji-hyun, observing his frustration, realizes he's a petty man who can't stand being ignored, especially by Ji-hyun, the only woman who's ever challenged him. Kang tells Manager that he sent Yi-kyung away without any regrets, insisting he feels absolutely nothing. Manager however, doesn't seem convinced. He brings up another topic, revealing that he's recommended Kang for an architect role in a cafe gallery project. This is because Kang has distanced himself from the Haemido Resort project and needs a little nudge to get back into work. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun has scheduled a meeting with a friend under a fake name to continue her Three Tears project, only to find that her friend has been delayed at work. Feeling dismissed, Ji-hyun is frustrated with how easily her friend blows her off. Starving, Ji-hyun stops for a bite to eat, but is disappointed by the small portion. Despite the doctor's warning about Yi-kyung's unhealthy diet, she considers ordering more food. She remembers the warning against noodles and the worry that Yi-kyung's eating habits will continue. Later, she returns home early to rest her body, and Yi-kyung wakes up earlier than usual. She quickly leaves to use a phone at a nearby store, apologizing to her boss for being ill the previous day, but receives some bad news. Meanwhile, Kang meets with a potential client but is turned off by the man's attitude and rejects the job. As he leaves, he notices Yi-kyung hurrying to the store, and for a brief moment, he almost follows her but decides against it. This near encounter makes it hard for him to sleep that night as he reflects on firing Yi-kyung and how she left without taking his money. Yi-kyung returns home dejected and sleeps through the night after losing her job, while Ji-hyun anxiously hovers over her. In the morning, Ji-hyun panics when she realizes Yi-kyung is awake, meaning Ji-hyun can't take over and meet Minho for her new job. The scheduler appears irritated and scolds Ji-hyun for getting Yi-kyung sick and fired. He reminds her that the powers that be granted her permission to use Yi-kyung's body with the condition that she doesn't harm it and works around Yi-kyung's life. Now that Yi-kyung's schedule is disrupted, Ji-hyun can no longer predict when she'll fall asleep, and the scheduler warns her to stay close or risk losing her chance. Meanwhile, Minho waits for Ji-hyun at home, growing increasingly frustrated with her absence. He eventually arrives late to work, where In-jung suggests they have lunch together, but he turns her down sharply. She's hurt, but he reminds her that they've always kept up appearances at the office, even when no one's watching. In a flashback, we learn how Minho and In-jung first met. One night, while walking through the neighborhood and talking to her mother, In-jung was kidnapped by thugs. Minho, coming back from a hiking trip, saw her struggle and chased down the car, rescuing her. After ensuring her safety, he walked her home and they exchanged names and numbers. Minho reassures In-jung that their deal will close soon, allowing them to date openly, but asks for her patience until then. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun's father is hiding a serious illness. Dr. Jo advises him to undergo surgery immediately, but he refuses, citing Ji-hyun's condition and his wife's fragile state. The doctor bluntly tells him there's no hope for Ji-hyun, even threatening to tell his wife about his health issues. However, Ji-hyun's father remains determined, unwilling to give up on his daughter. Minho wraps up the paperwork for the multi-million-dollar real estate deal before heading to Kang's restaurant to convince him to take on the Haemido project again. Minho thinks Kang's unique, eccentric design style would be perfect for one of the resort's vacation guest houses, but Kang turns him down. Minho insists, though, trying to push his point. Minho's mood has noticeably soured, and both Manager-o and Kang are beginning to notice. Minho's pitch about the pension is his excuse for visiting. The real reason he dropped by was to check if Yi-kyung had returned, something he isn't proud of. After leaving, he mutters to himself, questioning his own intentions. Ji-hyun stays at home, reflecting on how Yi-kyung is wasting her life and pondering what happened 5 years ago that led to her current state. As she searches for a photo album, she suddenly loses her grip on Yi-kyung's body and is thrown out. Yi-kyung wakes up on the floor, fully dressed, and starts recalling the strange occurrences in her life, like her washed hair and twisted ankle. Sensing that something is off, Yi-kyung goes through her hidden belongings and finds the shampoo, but she can't make sense of the oddities. She laughs bitterly, fed up with everything. And in a moment of despair, she grabs a piece of rope and attempts to make a noose, contemplating ending her misery. In a panic, Ji-hyun calls the scheduler, pleading for help to stop Yi-kyung from ending her life. To Ji-hyun's shock, the scheduler responds coldly. Again, he tells her to leave Yi-kyung alone, stating that whether she chooses to end her life is her decision, not theirs to intervene in. Just as Yi-kyung prepares to hang herself, there's a knock at the door. It's Dr. No. She initially ignores him, but his persistence finally forces her to open the door. Dr. No, having been worried when he couldn't find Yi-kyung at the convenience store, is relieved to see her alive. He returns her dried rose, although he doesn't fully understand its significance. The gesture softens Yi-kyung's anger, and she accepts both the rose and the card he offers, which invites her to talk if she wants. Back inside, Ji-hyun anxiously waits, hoping Yi-kyung won't go through with her suicide plan. Thankfully, Yi-kyung doesn't, and Ji-hyun tearfully thanks her for staying alive. She doesn't know the cause of Yi-kyung's misery, but she urges her to find strength. Ji-hyun shares her perspective, telling Yi-kyung how precious life is, the ability to touch, feel warmth, have a voice, and smile with others. She pleads for Yi-kyung to be strong so that Ji-hyun can live too. However, time passes, and over the next 4 days, Ji-hyun remains stuck in the apartment as Yi-kyung does nothing but eat ramen. As her days dwindle, Ji-hyun pleads with the scheduler for help, but he can't intervene directly since he's unable to influence the will of the living. However, annoyed by her constant requests and curious about Yi-kyung's situation, he contacts his senior Reaper to ask if he can use Tactic Dalvin 3 in this case. Tactic Dalvin 3 turns out to be the scheduler dressing up like a carefree hippie, adopting quirky mannerisms, and speaking in a falsetto voice. It's a sight to behold. He visits a late-night coffee shop where he begins to complain about the bad energy in the place. Using his Reaper knowledge, he reveals personal details about the manager's life, like how the manager's dog passed away last month. Then, with a dramatic shudder, he loses his spirit sense and switches back to normal, all while keeping the manager on edge. Before leaving, Psychic Hippie delivers a few parting words of advice. If the manager hires a woman under 30, thin and hard to make smile, he'll enjoy a long life. It's both strange and hilarious. The scheduler's quirky tactic to 3 proves to be both hilarious and oddly fitting, revealing that it must have been used enough in the past to earn a nickname. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun, who's been bombarded by mysterious job flyers only she can see, finally notices one that's practically tailor-made for her, a massive poster with strict requirements: female to 8am, 29 years old, 170 cm. Under 51 kg, it even lists the perks like a familial atmosphere and minimal supervision. Despite the absurdity, Yi-kyung reluctantly takes the flyer to the cafe, but when she tries to show it to others, no one else can see it. The cafe manager, however, is eager to hire her based on her fit for the role. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun vows to be more careful when using Yi-kyung's body and asks the scheduler for another favor: more information about Yi-kyung's life. She feels sympathy for her loneliness and is determined to track down her family if they exist, despite the schedulers grumbling about how women always ask for more after receiving kindness. The scheduler, although reluctant, agrees to help Ji-hyun track down Yi-kyung's family, despite it being outside his usual duties, citing his growing curiosity about Yi-kyung. With only 33 days remaining, Ji-hyun finally gets a turn in the body and heads to Minho's apartment to start her new job. No longer expecting her, greets her coldly but doesn't send her away. He asks for her ID card, which she doesn't have, so she provides her phone number instead. He then tells her to wait for him to return by 11 p.m., an order she reluctantly agrees to, though she's annoyed about spending the day stuck inside. Once settled, she starts searching through his things, hoping to find some incriminating evidence. Seo plans to visit Ji-hyun with In-jung on their day off, but In-jung has other plans, which Seo assumes are related to a new boyfriend. In-jung gets annoyed at Seo for constantly bringing up Ji-hyun, and asserts that their lives can't revolve around her anymore. Seo, however, argues that not much time has passed since the accident, but In-jung is determined to move on. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun, searching through Minho's files, finds a photo album of Minho and In-jung together, dating back to 2006, before Minho studied abroad and before she knew him. This confirms her suspicions about their past and their deception. At the restaurant, manager Oh forces Kang to do some calisthenics to break his isolation, and it's in this situation that Ji-hyun unexpectedly finds him after leaving Minho's apartment. Still upbeat as ever, Kang is surprised by Ji-hyun's upbeat attitude and her casual tone, calling him Hang Kang Shi since he's no longer her boss. Ji-hyun, now a paying customer, enjoys her meal and chats with the manager's wife, while Kang pretends not to listen but overhears her conversation. He learns that she has a new, better-paying job, though she admits she was more comfortable working at his restaurant. Kang doesn't directly address her but orders manager Oh not to charge her. As Ji-hyun leaves, she insists she paid for her meal and makes it clear that she has no interest in his engaged friend. Ji-hyun is initially skeptical of Kang's concern, but is surprised when he genuinely asks about her health and her comfort with her new job. She softens and promises the manager's wife to return for pasta before heading out. However, the curious waitress, Soon-jung, speculates that Yi-kyung's new job must be at a bar due to the high pay and afternoons off, which leads to the assumption that Yi-kyung has lost all hope. Kang, alarmed, rushes after Yi-kyung, but misses her. As she's hiding just around the corner watching him search, Ji-hyun feels touched and relieved, thinking to herself how grateful she is to have someone like Kang, even if his concern is for Yi-kyung. As Kang continues searching for Yi-kyung, Ji-hyun struggles with her emotions, torn between wanting to approach him and the pain of knowing he's worried about Yi-kyung, not her. She runs off, fighting back tears. Meanwhile, Minho is preoccupied with Yi-kyung waiting for him at home, debating whether to leave work early. When In-jung calls to confirm their dinner date, he makes up an excuse about needing to work late. However, In-jung decides to surprise him by heading over to make him dinner, inadvertently complicating things. In-jung walks into Minho's apartment and is shocked to find Ji-hyun in Yi-kyung's body glaring at her. Ji-hyun, having the upper hand, questions In-jung about her secret relationship with Minho and how she knew the lock code. In-jung lies and leaves, feeling uneasy. Minho arrives home, flustered after Ji-hyun confronts him about In-jung's visit. He later calls in Jung to suggest dinner for damage control. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun sneaks into Minho's room, trying to investigate the mystery file he brought home, but it's locked away. In-jung is confused by Minho hiring Yik-young as a housekeeper, especially since he usually does help people like that. Minho brushes it off and asks if In-jung ever truly loved him. She says no, and he dismisses the idea of ever falling for someone like Yik-young, showing his disdain for her position and further probing his complex and hypercritical nature. Ji-hyun returns home and is pleased to find her new schedule offers more free time. She decides to go for a run, thinking that the best way to repay Yik-young is by staying healthy and active. It's such a sweet gesture, and I love how she talks to Yik-young like an older sister. During her run, though, she starts hearing the sound of someone or something chasing her and panics. It's your scheduler, Ji-hyun. And hey, you're a ghost too. Reaper boy appears, decked out in workout gear with sneakers that even have wings. Seriously, his wardrobe deserves its own highlight reel. He teases her about not having any friends to gather tears from, and she justifies it by saying her friends are busy and don't understand how serious her situation is. He notices she's juggling her job with Minho while also sticking to her routine and teasingly raps about it as seriously, can he get any cuter? Ji-hyun asks if he's ever just thought about his life for 4 days. Of course, he hasn't since he's not alive. She opens up, saying that being stuck in Yik-young's house made her realize how precious each day is and how much can be done in just one day. And now I'm feeling like I need to get more done. Thanks, show. Ji-hyun promises to make each day count, and the scheduler is proud to see her growing up a bit. He warns her not to get into any more trouble, but she affectionately puts her arm around him. Thankful for his concern, he jokingly says he's more worried about himself since she's his last duty before his 5-year term ends. He reminds her that it'll be smooth sailing from here, sure, no more trouble at all. After he disappears, Ji-hyun calls out she'll keep in touch, but he scoffs, thinking she believes they're friends while still holding his arm out as if she's still there. Meanwhile, In-jung visits Kang's restaurant to do some snooping. She asks the waitress why Kang fired Yik-young if he likes her, and the answer doesn't sit well with her. Yik-young made a move for Minho. She also uncovers that Kang has a high regard for Ji-hyun, possibly because he wants to protect Minho, even though they all assumed he disliked her. Kang continues to worry about Yik-young Ji-hyun, mistakenly thinking she's working at a bar because of him. Manager Oh catches him daydreaming and suggests he go find her if he's so concerned. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun heads home and thanks Yik-young sweetly before heading to a new coffee shop, where Yik-young gets her first customer of the night. Dr. Na, he jokes about seeming like a stalker, and she reassures him that he did his best as a doctor and that it wasn't his fault. Dr. Na agrees, acknowledging that he did everything he could, and adds that when he met her 5 years ago, he was a new lead. Dr. Na reflects on how he met Yik-young during the lowest point in her life while he was at his happiest. 3 years ago, he experienced a personal tragedy when his wife died in a car accident, and he shares that some things in life can only be understood through experience. He tells Yik-young that if she can't forget, then she should at least allow herself to miss him, just as he did because he missed her deeply. This moment reassures Ji-hyun that he's not a stalker. Inspired by his words, Yik-young finally allows herself to reminisce. At home, she takes out an old picture from grade school, showing her with her younger brother, Yusu. She lets herself remember and miss him, crying as the song Scarecrow plays in the background. The next day, Ji-hyun heads to Minho's apartment to officially begin her work. He gives her a list of tasks, including hand washing his clothes. Treating her like a servant, Minho notices the burn on Ji-hyun's hand from the espresso machine the previous night, and it starts to bother his conscience. He unexpectedly leaves work early and heads home. In-jung spots him and catches him in a lie, so she rushes to Kang's place, claiming that Minho is pushing forward with the Haemido project and that Kang should clear things up. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun uses the time to search for the secret file and finds Minho's hidden safe. However, before she can try to open it, Minho returns. He pretends not to have come back specifically for her burn, offering ointment instead. As they argue, the pot Ji-hyun left on the stove begins to burn. Minho rushes to open the door just as Kang arrives unexpectedly, setting up a tense moment. Kang is furious when he sees Yik-young there and tries to physically drag her out. However, she stands firm that this is where she wants to stay. Even Minho is taken aback. In Ji-hyun's mind, She apologizes to Kang, knowing she still has unfinished business. Kang is a mix of jealousy and protectiveness, but he feels completely rejected. Angrily and disappointed, he asks, was it this all along? Ji-hyun doesn't respond, turning her back to him as she silently cries. Kang leaves, berating himself for worrying about Ji-hyun, even planning to search for her. Ji-hyun, in the bathroom, weeps as she realizes she can't fix things with him. Meanwhile, Kang returns to work in a terrible mood and destroys his office, replaying her words about having no interest in Minho. Now doubting they were lies, Minho, on the other hand, is pleased, thinking that Ji-hyun's declaration to stay proves she has feelings for him. He suggests they go out for dinner and takes her to a cozy family restaurant, a place Ji-hyun realizes he's never brought her to. Minho takes Ji-hyun to a family restaurant his mother used to frequent, and when she jests that he must have brought his fiancé there, he calls her bluff, pointing out that if she wasn't interested, she would have left with Kang when he offered her a job. His condescending comment about not trusting a poor woman's pride seems to come from personal experience, suggesting he's familiar with struggling and the lengths people go to rise above it. After the meal, Ji-hyun wonders why he brought her to a place special to him, a place he never brought Ji-hyun. She starts to question Minho's feelings, wondering if he might like her or Ji-hyun. At home, Ghost Ji-hyun asks Ji-hyun if Minho likes her or Ji-hyun, unsure about the situation. She follows Ji-hyun to work and calls the scheduler to meet her, complaining about how long he makes people wait, but he reminds her to be grateful that he even meets her at all. The scheduler asks why they're at Ji-hyun's house, and Ji-hyun reminds him that he's the one who dislikes being there. He brushes it off casually, saying, "Here." They're suggesting it's not the location but the third party involved that makes him uncomfortable. She then asks him to help track down Song Yi-soo, but he refuses, saying he's not a help center and that she should handle it herself. With his remaining days as a scheduler, he has a lot to take care of before his term ends. He casually mentions his plans, hinting he might be off to rock out in Hongdae. Ji-hyun retorts, calling him a cold bastard, pointing out that he must have loved someone when he was alive. The scheduler reveals that he died young at 23 and never had the chance to love anyone. He asks Ji-hyun if she knows what it feels like to die at 23. Ji-hyun, frustrated, responds, "Why wouldn't I know? It feels awful, but..." The scheduler confesses that it doesn't just feel awful, it feels unfinished, crazy unfinished. He explains that while his memories are gone, the feelings remain, and now, as a scheduler, he's living out the life he never got to have. Ji-hyun sympathizes with the scheduler, feeling bad for him after he opens up about his untimely death and unfulfilled life. However, he quickly shuts down any further talk about Ji-hyun, urging her not to waste his time. Just as he turns to leave, they share an intense, emotional moment, their closeness visibly affecting him. He tells Ji-hyun not to call him when Ji-hyun is around and leaves. Meanwhile, In-jung is curious about what happened when Kang went to Minho's and decides to use Kang's birthday as an excuse to find out. She knows Seo-woo has a present for him and suggests they stop by. Little does Seo-woo know, Kang has feelings for her best friend, Ji-hyun, which makes it even harder for Ji-hyun to get Seo-woo's tears for her task. Minho is alarmed when his father unexpectedly visits the office and later vomits for the second time. After a visit to the doctor, he learns that his father has a brain tumor and refuses surgery until Ji-hyun's condition improves. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun struggles with cracking a safe 6-digit code, calculating the number of possibilities but still feeling frustrated. While searching for clues, she notices today's date on Minho's calendar, which marks Kang's birthday at the same time. Manager wakes Kang up from his downward spiral following an argument with Ji-hyun. He informs him it's his birthday and gives him a traditional birthday soup, surprising Kang with mussels in the dish. Manager O reveals that Ji-hyun made the soup having prepared extra and dropped it off earlier. Kang, staring at his birthday soup, has a flashback to high school when his mother brought him soup on his birthday. He rejected her and threw it on the ground. Ji-hyun does a magic trick in class and bets Kang, forcing him to do whatever she says if he loses. After he loses, she makes him join her for lunch. When he notices the soup, he gets angry and embarrassed, asking if she saw everything. Ji-hyun scolds him for treating his mom poorly despite being grown. She forces him to eat the soup, and he reluctantly agrees, only if she turns around while he eats. He smiles as he eats, and Ji-hyun, unaware, turns her back happily. Kang, utterly flustered and emotional, exclaims in frustration, "Why the hell is this woman like this?" Kang asks Manager Oh if Wiki-young really brought the soup, and Manager Oh confirms it, adding that she specifically asked him not to mention it. This only confuses Kang further as he says, "This is my mother's birthday soup. I don't know what I'm feeling, whether it's because of Shin Jae-in or Song Ye-kyung. I just don't know." He bolts out, rushing past In-jung and Seo-woo, and heads straight to Minho's apartment. He rings the doorbell and bangs on the door, shouting Ye-kyung's name. After a moment of hesitation, she lets him in. Kang demands to know why she's here. "If you're interested in Minho, just say it, and we're done." He waits for her response, but she stays silent. That's enough for him. He tells her to stop and drags her out, ignoring the laundry. She's torn between staying to find out what's in Minho's safe and being touched by Kang's concern. Kang explains his actions by saying he can't let her stay in Minho's place, referring to Minho as his friend's fiancé rather than just his friend. This shows his loyalty to Ji-hyun. Ji-hyun, moved by his words, tears up, and when he asks if she plans to stay, she shakes her head no. Kang then relaxes and takes her back to continue her job at Heaven. Still gruff, he tells Ji-hyun not to slack off, but reminds Manager Oh that she shouldn't be doing the dishes due to her burn. He confesses to the manager that having Ye-kyung back gives him a sense of comfort, though he can't figure out why. The manager gives him a skeptical look, silently questioning him, probably echoing what everyone else is thinking. Silly boy, it's like he's completely clueless about human emotions. But it's more complicated than just being interested in Ye-kyung. His internal struggle comes from feeling Ji-hyun's presence in her. He realizes he's reacting to that familiar resemblance, but he can't make sense of why it affects him this way, and really, who can blame him? It's not every day your true love nearly dies and then comes back in someone else's body, even temporarily. Minho comes home, rings the doorbell, so even though he owns the place and is alarmed to find it empty and messy, he's upset and brushes off a call from In-jung, who expresses concerns about Ji-hyun's father hiding meetings from them, which could jeopardize their plans. Minho, however, is distracted by his growing obsession with Ye-kyung and dismisses her worries. He hurries to Kang's restaurant to ask for Ye-kyung's address and learns that Kang took her away out of anger. Kang explains he feels responsible for introducing Ye-kyung to Minho and reminds him that Ji-hyun is his fiancé. Minho coldly responds that he no longer feels the need to love someone he can't be with, effectively dumping Ji-hyun. Kang is shocked by Minho's quick acceptance of the situation, but Minho insists that he can turn his feelings off like a switch, much to Kang's disbelief. This mirrors the tension between Seo and In-jung, hinting that Kang and Seo-woo may be the first two people to shed tears for Ji-hyun. Afterward, the guys join the women for birthday cake, and Kang looks adorably awkward as the center of attention. Ji-hyun sings along from a distance before stepping forward to greet Seo-woo warmly, deliberately ignoring the other two who've been dishonest. She cheerfully returns the soup thermos to Seo-woo, who's clueless about how she got it in the first place. In-jung had used the thermos to bring Minho dinner, and Ji-hyun, with a playful tone, suggests, "Ask Shin In-jung," sparking everyone's curiosity. In-jung tries to brush off the topic, but Ji-hyun isn't letting her off the hook. She begins to explain the story, only for In-jung to cut her off and ask to speak with her privately. Outside, Ji-hyun pretends to be innocent and asks In-jung why her visit to Minho's apartment needs to be such a secret, urging her to explain. Ji-hyun guesses the secret, saying, "I got it. You weren't there on an errand, were you? So he's not just your friend's fiancé. I get it now why you want me to keep quiet." In-jung denies it, but Ji-hyun just nods and says, "Okay, I won't tell anyone that Kang Minho is your boyfriend." Kang comes out to check on them, and Ji-hyun makes a "my lips are sealed" gesture, which reminds him of Ji-hyun doing the same thing. It's a common gesture, but paired with her smile, it makes Ye-kyung seem familiar, something In-jung also notices. Seo-woo, curious about the odd behavior, later pesters In-jung for the full story. She makes a few educated guesses, suspecting it involves In-jung's mystery boyfriend, but she's still a few details fall short of the truth. Minho calls In-jung out, urging her to be patient until everything settles. But In-jung, fed up with all the secrecy, responds that she'd prefer if everyone knew the truth so they could date openly. Even if Ji-hyun's father found out, what could he do to them other than potentially ruin the plans they've spent 2 years building and leave them with nothing? Minho realizes that In-jung, driven by jealousy, sent Kang to his place to find Yik-young there. In-jung admits it, saying she couldn't stand the thought of Young lingering around him. Minho apologizes for hiring Yik-young, acknowledging that it was a cruel thing to do. In-jung's increasing evasiveness raises suspicions, and Seo-woo sneaks outside to have her talking with Minho, though she can't hear their conversation. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun shares with Yik-young how Kang took her away from Minho, and she feels relieved to be away from the stress of being around him. She's in a good mood since she has an appointment with 3 free friends the next day, hoping to get at least one tear from them. Feeling grateful for Yik-young's listening ear, Ji-hyun decides that if her scheduler doesn't track down Yisu, she will do it herself. Meanwhile, Daddy Shin is quietly arranging his affairs. He keeps his illness a secret from his wife, but tells her he's leaving the company to Mingho, which she disapproves of since he's not their son-in-law yet. Despite this, he remains firm in his decision. Minho, unaware of the president's plans, is concerned about his health after learning the truth from the doctor. Though he hopes for the president's recovery, part of him may want to win the company fair and square. President Shin, touched by Minho's concern, feels reassured, but he also believes that Minho is a good person. On her way to meet her friends, Ji-hyun spots Kang walking by and calls out, "Hen Kang," before quickly remembering he's her boss. Kang, however, is struck by how Yik-young's way of saying his name mirrors Ji-hyun's, prompting him to ask about her high school and why she cooked mussels in the soup if she doesn't like them herself. Though Ji-hyun considers several possible explanations, she senses a hint of suspicion in his questions. He casually mentions that Yik-young reminds him of a friend. While they weren't particularly close, he feels he owes her for a lot. Ji-hyun is left wondering what exactly he could mean by that. What could he possibly owe her for? In-jung learns about President Shen's plans when the lawyer delivers the will, revealing that the president intends to leave the company to Minho. Minho remains silent, not revealing his thoughts as In-jung wonders about the will, leaving everyone curious about his next move. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun meets her friends at a coffee shop. Noticing their somber mood, they express their shock over the situation, realizing just how dire it is. Seeing them on the verge of tears, Ji-hyun encourages them to say something heartfelt, hoping it'll help register in Ji-hyun's almost comatose state. She records their emotional words, and the friends begin to break down in tears. However, Ji-hyun's hope falters when she notices her necklace is still empty, leaving her wondering why she hasn't gotten any tears yet. Ji-hyun reflects on the scheduler's warning that not all tears are pure, and starts to question the motives of her friends. As they each express their own selfish reasons for crying, Ji-hyun realizes that their tears may not be genuine. One is upset about her thesis, another feels resentful over Ji-hyun's supposed perfect life, and the last one sees her accident as a wake-up call after contemplating suicide. Despite their grievances, the friends admit Ji-hyun was always nice, though sometimes to a fault. Feeling shaken, Ji-hyun leaves the meeting and heads to work, disheartened by the loss of her friends. Kang notices her distress, but before they can discuss it, Seo-woo informs them that President Shen plans to finalize his will, leaving the company to Minho. Ji-hyun, desperate to stop it, rushes to the scheduler for help. The scheduler jokes about the Shin family's trust issues, but refuses to interfere directly with human matters, warning Ji-hyun that doing so would result in punishment. Despite his reluctance, he's moved by her tears and consults his death phone for a loophole, hitting the chance button. The deal he offers is this: in exchange for being able to touch one item just once while in spirit form, she must give up one of her 49 days. She eagerly accepts, fully aware of his warning that she'll have to handle everything else on her own, with no further help from him. As Ji-hyun speaks, she doesn't notice the manager's wife and the cafe waitress watching her from across the street, thinking she looks like a crazy woman talking to someone invisible. The scheduler. They report this to Kang, telling him that Yik-young's lost her mind and went home. Ji-hyun quickly heads back to the apartment to drop off the body, piecing her plan together as she goes. She stuffs a newspaper into an envelope, addresses it to her father's office, and arranges for a courier to deliver it immediately. Once everything is set, she exits the body and hurries away. Ji-hyun follows the deliveryman to office building where In-jung accepts the envelope and takes it to Daddy Shin just before he's about to finalize the will. Inside, Dad finds a newspaper, dismissing it as a prank until he reads an article about a woman who woke up from a coma after 20 years. Ji-hyun desperately pleads with him not to sign the will, but he proceeds, unaffected. In a last-ditch effort, Ji-hyun uses her one-time only power to knock the seal off the table, hoping to stop him. Though Dad senses something is odd, he still tries to continue. At that moment, an unseen force knocks a framed photo to the ground, and the scheduler appears, breaking the rules to help her. Regretful, Ji-hyun watches as Dad finally takes the hint, looks at the photo, and questions if he's been treating her like she's already gone. He decides to hold off on signing the will. Ji-hyun thanks the scheduler repeatedly, but he's distracted, worried about being caught for breaking the rules. A motorcycle suddenly arrives and a leather-clad grandma confronts him. She puts him in a headlock, scolds him for meddling with human affairs, and sends Ji-hyun away. The scheduler denies being romantically involved with Ji-hyun and tries to explain himself, but Grandma Scheduler adds a week to his term as punishment, making him beg for mercy. Meanwhile, Kang, concerned about Ik-young's sudden departure, searches for her. He arrives in her neighborhood just as Ji-hyun rushes home. Ik-young, noticing her door is open and unsettled by strange events, hurries out, clutching the doctor's business card. As Ik-young heads out to use the neighborhood store's phone, she passes right by Kang, who's asking for directions and misses her entirely. When he arrives at her door, he's confused to find the place empty, wondering where she could have gone. Later, Ik-young meets Dutter No at a coffee shop and confides in him about her growing fears that she might be losing her mind. She lists strange occurrences, unexplained ankle pain, her landlady claiming to have spoken with her, vomiting food she didn't eat, and waking up in the middle of the room with the door open. Daughter No suggests sleepwalking as a possible explanation for her memory lapses and advises her to come to the hospital for tests the next day. That night, Kang is lost in thought, clutching a charm bracelet that hints at a past rift between him and Ji-hyun, leaving viewers curious about the details. The next morning, he brings Ji-hyun's favorite pink roses to the hospital, where he's been faithfully keeping her room stocked with them. However, Ji-hyun's father is suspicious of his frequent visits, seeing Kang as just a distant acquaintance who quit working on their project. He disapprovingly tells Kang to stop coming to the hospital, which leaves Kang visibly hurt. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun arrives at work to find the restaurant closed for the day. She sits at the piano and hums a tune, which catches Kang's attention. As he listens, the melody triggers a memory of a time back in high school when he had been napping in the auditorium and overheard Ji-hyun playing, unaware that he was there. He spots Ik-young at the piano, but in his mind, Ji-hyun's image overlays hers. The feeling is undeniable now. With suspicion and disbelief in his eyes, he steps closer and asks, "Who are you?" Then, as if trying to confirm the impossible, he adds, "Are you Ji-hyun?" Kang, overwhelmed by the sound of Ji-hyun's song, confronts her at the piano, asking, Who are you? Are you Ji-hyun?" Ji-hyun is stunned and stammers, unable to deny or explain herself. Her hesitation only strengthens Kang's suspicions as he lists all the ways she reminds him of Ji-hyun. Panicked, Ji-hyun grabs her tear necklace, which she knows will expose her true identity if anyone figures it out, and insists that she doesn't know what he's talking about. Manager Oh enters just in time to stop Kang from shouting at Ji-hyun, explaining that the piano is the only memento Kang has left of his mother and that he's just acting out due to his sensitivity. As they stand apart, each lost in their thoughts, Ji-hyun wonders, "Hen Kang, how did you know?" Kang thinks, "It doesn't make sense." Ji-hyun worries, what if Kang keeps suspecting? Kang reflects, "I must have seemed like a total crazy person." Later, Kang finds her and asks for her phone number, trying to act cool but hiding his embarrassment. He's concerned about her well-being and mentions he went to her place the night before, realizing she wasn't home. Ji-hyun, a bit slow on the uptake, concludes that Kang must dislike her because he got angry at the similarities between Ik-young and Ji-hyun. She doesn't realize that Kang's shouting was just masking his true feelings. Ji-hyun visits Seo and gets a rare moment to relax over pastries with her friend. However, Seo keeps steering the conversation toward In-jung and the mystery boyfriend, making Ji-hyun feel like Seo has already forgotten about her. Meanwhile, Minho and In-jung are out on a date, and In-jung reveals that she's quitting her job the next day. She mentions the rumors about a ghost preventing the president from signing his will and expresses her desire to be rid of any reminders of Ji-hyun. At the hospital, Ji-hyun arrives to find her father collapsed. Seeing him beside her comatose body, she assumes he's just exhausted from the stress and worry, her tears flowing as she watches. Ji-hyun exits the hospital lobby in tears and Minho sees her. He grabs her arm and asks why she's there, but Ji-hyun just tells him to let go and walks away, thinking he's just there to get the will signed. When Minho goes upstairs, he finds her father hiding his condition from her mother. He decides to intervene and tells her mother that her father needs surgery immediately. Ji-hyun watches but doesn't hear the conversation. Meanwhile, Seo questions In-jung about her secret boyfriend again, causing In-jung to panic. Seo confesses to following In-jung and wonders if her boyfriend looks a lot like Minho, not realizing the deeper connection. The next morning, Ji-hyun grows impatient waiting for Ik-young to return from work and calls the scheduler for help. The scheduler, still angry over his extended sentence, shows up in person to yell at her for causing trouble. He complains about the consequences of helping her, but Ji-hyun apologizes, knowing he only has himself to blame. The scheduler angrily tells Ji-hyun that if she's truly sorry, she'll stop calling him, as seeing her face annoys him. Ji-hyun asks if he can find out when Ik-young will return, but the scheduler refuses, yelling no before vanishing. Meanwhile, Ik-young is asleep in Dr. No's office, being monitored for sleep apnea and other issues to explain her memory gaps. As she sleeps, we see a flashback of Ik-young and Yusu, not siblings, but a couple in love, enjoying a picnic and talking about their dream home, the same one marked in the book Ik-young still possesses. Kang listens to the song Ji-hyun played on the piano, his mind racing with all the connections he's drawing between Ji-hyun and Ik-young. He asks if Ik-young's come to work yet, frustrated that she made him worry yesterday and hasn't shown up. The waiter reminds him she's freelance, but the worry continues to eat at him, especially since she is not answering her phone. Kang goes to Ik-young's house, finally encountering her without Ji-hyun's soul inside. He tries to get her attention, but Ik-young doesn't acknowledge him and walks past him, leaving him confused. He wonders if she might have a twin, but recalls her saying she has no siblings. Just then, Ji-hyun in Ik-young's body rushes out and leaves before Kang can speak to her. Meanwhile, Dad goes ahead and signs the will, which pushes Minho to take action. He decides to halt the land deal and reverse the hostile takeover. Aiming to inherit the entire company instead, Minho meets with a contact to block the deal, using blackmail to force cooperation. Back at home, Mom calls In-jung and Seo to ask for their help in convincing Dad to undergo surgery. She reveals that he has a tumor, and In-jung quickly puts the pieces together, connecting the will and Minho's involvement in these matters. She calls Minho, insisting they meet immediately. When he mentions he's heading home to grab a file, she decides to meet him there. But Ji-hyun is already at his place, attempting to access the safe. When Minho arrives, she quickly grabs a handful of laundry and walks out, feigning surprise. She explains that she came back to return the key and, feeling guilty for leaving the laundry behind, decided to do a load before heading out. Minho barely has time to question Ji-hyun's excuse before In-jung arrives. Panicking, he hides Ji-hyun in his room and asks her to stay quiet. In-jung confronts him about knowing everything: Ji-hyun's father, the tumor, and the will, and Ji-hyun overhears the entire conversation on the verge of tears. Minho tries to calm In-jung, who accuses him of keeping secrets and insists he go through with the land deal. She expresses her frustration over waiting for Ji-hyun's condition to improve. Minho lies, saying he'll take care of it before leaving to change. Ji-hyun silently glares at him as he opens the safe and takes a file, leaving without an explanation. Overcome with emotion, Ji-hyun collapses in tears. She later returns to heaven in a daze, her phone buzzing with calls. Minho keeps calling Ji-hyun, but eventually calls Kang, asking if Ik-young is at work. Kang lies, saying he doesn't know her address, and both men continue to stew over their unanswered calls. Meanwhile, Kang finds Ji-hyun on the patio, visibly distressed. He insists she eat and presses her about what's wrong, suspecting something is wrong with her father. When she denies it, he grows more confused, and she quickly makes an excuse to run off. At home, In-jung gets confronted by Seo-woo, who is frustrated by her behavior towards Ji-hyun and her family. In-jung, now cold, snaps back, revealing her disdain for Ji-hyun and admitting she never liked her. Minho then assigns his secretary to track down Yi-kyung, unaware that her phone line is a direct-to-Reaper connection, making it impossible to trace. Ji-hyun complains to the scheduler about the whole tears gathering task, questioning why it has to be tears at all. Why can't people just love her without crying? The scheduler explains that tears are the most direct way humans express deep emotions, and though the types of tears vary, they always come from intense feelings, whether happiness or sadness. He points out that Ji-hyun herself doesn't shed genuine tears for others either. Defending herself, Ji-hyun insists she does, but the scheduler mocks her, saying this is why he dislikes humans. He tells her to stop assuming things she hasn't even experienced. Ji-hyun then asks if anyone genuinely loves her, and the scheduler, with his jaded view on human emotions, responds that he can't know. Human hearts are fickle, constantly shifting from love to hate, warmth to coldness, resentment to understanding. His cynical view is poignant, especially as it foreshadows his own discovery of a forever kind of love. Kang storms around his office, clearly agitated and confused. Manager Oh watches him quietly, then finally suggests that Kang should go find Yi-kyung to figure out what's really going on. As one, is he just curious if Yi-kyung lied? Two, does he keep seeing Ji-hyun in Yi-kyung? Or she, three, is he genuinely worried about Yi-kyung because something's clearly wrong with her? Kang, flustered, responds, all of the above, and decides to follow the advice. This should be interesting. He waits outside Yi-kyung's apartment, and just before midnight, Ji-hyun arrives. She heads inside, and Kang is left wondering what to do next. But then, unexpectedly, Yi-kyung steps out and walks right past him, completely ignoring him. A bewildered man follows a woman, Yi-kyung, to Purple Coffee, realizing she works 2 jobs. When he approaches her, she doesn't recognize him at first, leading to confusion and frustration on his part. After she finally remembers him, he becomes angry and rushes out, heading to Manager Oh's house to seek answers. There, they humorously speculate about Yi-kyung's strange behavior, including her insistence on working for only 48 days. Manager Oh mentions a belief that 49 days is the time a wandering soul has to complete a task to live, but Kang dismisses this as illogical. The passage reflects Kang's growing confusion and the mystery surrounding Yi-kyung's actions, challenging previous assumptions like the twin theory. Yi-kyung returns home in the morning where Ji-hyun, in a vulnerable state, expresses her gratitude and sorrow. Ji-hyun admits she feels unloved and believes she must have lived her life poorly. She apologizes for failing to find Yusu and prepares for her final day. Waking up in Yi-kyung's body, she cleans the house as a gesture of thanks and leaves heartfelt letters for Yi-kyung and her father, explaining her decision to give up her 49-day journey to save her dad. The scheduler discovers her plan to abandon her mission. Ji-hyun then dresses up, gifts her coworkers, and surprises Kang at his desk, cheerfully greeting him. It's a lovely morning, and Kang, as he wakes up startled. The scene captures Ji-hyun's emotional farewell and her resolve to make her final day meaningful. Ji-hyun cheerfully engages with Kang, teasing him about using informal speech, a banma, since she is technically older than him as Song Yi-kyung. She enjoys playing the role of his Nuna, older sister friend, and her lightheartedness contrasts with Kang's bewildered reaction. She then shares a heartfelt reflection on love, explaining that true love sometimes means allowing someone to misunderstand you to spare them pain, even if it hurts deeply. However, Kang fails to grasp the deeper meaning behind her words. Ji-hyun resigns from her job and hints at leaving, but Kang misinterprets her intentions, likely due to Minho's earlier phone call assuming the worst. The scene highlights Ji-hyun's emotional maturity and Kang's inability to fully understand her feelings. Kang accuses Ji-hyun, as in Yi-kyung's body, of returning to work for living with Minho. Despite her denial, frustrated, he yells at her for causing confusion and not being honest about her feelings. Ji-hyun questions why Kang is so protective of Ji-hyun's fiancé if they weren't close, But Kang insists his concern is about Ikkyung, which hurts Ji-hyun as she assumes Kang only cares about losing Ikkyung to Minho. Their conversation highlights the emotional complexity of their situation. Compounded by Ji-hyun's soul being in another's body, Kang grows suspicious, demanding to know her true intentions and who he really met the previous night. Ji-hyun responds by revealing Ikkyung's lonely life as an orphan with no one to rely on or love. She then bids him farewell with a childish insult, adding a touch of humor to the tense moment. Kang, left frustrated, shouts after her to leave and never return, though his words lack any real effect. The scene underscores the misunderstandings and emotional turmoil between the characters. Ji-hyun walks away in tears, upset that Kang didn't send her off with a smile despite their final goodbye. Meanwhile, Kang retreats to his room to brood. Ji-hyun then goes to the hospital to find her parents but discovers they are at home. She overhears her father refusing to undergo surgery, insisting he must either let Ji-hyun go peacefully or be there to hold her if she wakes up, leaving him unable to proceed while she remains in limbo. This deeply affects Ji-hyun, who struggles with her plan to save him. Simultaneously, Kang finds the seal Ji-hyun had hidden among the plants, revealing the name Shin Ji-hyun, which shocks him. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun, unable to follow through with her plan due to her father's stubbornness, stands in the street, watching people pass by. In a moment of desperation, she pleads to the heavens, "Someone save me. I have to live. I want to live," expressing her deep desire to survive and overcome her predicament. The scene captures the emotional turmoil and pivotal moments for both Ji-hyun and Kang. And then, as if the heavens had heard her plea, a single drop appears in her necklace. She glances down and sees it, her first genuine tear.